So in case you missed it last week, changed the schedule to go from 5 days a week to 2 days a week because we're working on some brand new content in Inland Hills that we're pretty excited to unveil at some point. We're still working on it. So, but we'll let you know when that happens very soon, hopefully. Hey, tonight I wanted to do something a little different. First of all, I wanted to just go ahead and point out that yes, my hair is like the worst possible length it can be at this point, right? It's not long enough to not be like a burr haircut, and it's too long to be a burr haircut. It's in an awful place. So that'll just keep growing because I don't know what else to do with it. The quarantine cut is, the struggle is real, guys. So, hey, I was thinking this week earlier, just about kind of the unknown future that we continue to hold on to. So parts of the economy are opening back up. There's going to be different, shops, church will open back up, at some point in the future. And as we just keep rolling through that, the truth is we don't know for sure, still what the next weeks, months, couple years looks like, because there's all kinds of questions about where things end up landing and how we end up navigating that as a nation, as a world, like all of those things. And so there's just a lot of unknown. And I there's this tendency within us that I find so interesting, at least in myself, that we oftentimes like turn away from God in the moments that we need him the most. It's so interesting because you'd think that that's the time you'd run to him. And a lot of times we get there eventually, but there's like a resistance sometimes in our heart. And I don't know if it's, I think it's different depending on the circumstances and the person. Sometimes it's because of some kind of pride, like not wanting to acknowledge that the future is uncertain or that we're a little bit scared. Sometimes it's that we aren't sure how to articulate what it is that we're walking through, or we don't want to be disappointed. If we were to turn it over to him and then we were to feel like it didn't work out that well, that would be really disappointing. And so there can be all kinds of reasons. But as I was thinking through that and just reflecting on that reality, I thought about this message I gave a few years ago. It's been probably 3 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago now, where I shared the story of my son Jack. Jack is 7 years old now. He was 4, I think, when 4 or 5 when I shared this story. But it's a little bit about how he was diagnosed with autism and kind of what our journey was like walking through that. And as I watched this old clip earlier this week and just reliving in my mind some of the uncertainty that I was facing, that our family was facing at that time, was helpful reflection for me to recognize how God entered into the middle of it. So I thought instead of giving a more face-to-face devotional tonight, I actually share this video clip that I did a couple of years ago about my son Jack. And I hope that it's really encouraging to you because it was a season where we were scared to death and God really stepped up big for us. So here's that, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I have a son named Jack. He's 4 years old. He's got bright blonde hair. He loves Batman and Spider-Man, and he loves talking about baby Jesus and baby Moses, and he loves Ollie the owl. If you have kids in our kids department here, they have a bit of a mascot named Ollie that teaches them Bible stories and Bible lessons. He's funny, and he's sharp. Some of you know that when Jack was very young, when he was 18 months old, he was diagnosed with autism. And while I talk about the fact that Jack has an autistic diagnosis sometimes in our gatherings, and many of you would be familiar with that, what I don't talk about very often, and really haven't said anything about it for probably 3 years now, is about what that journey was like for Emily and for myself. We moved to Carlisle, and we're very far from home, and we find out we're having a baby, and then we find out we're having a baby boy. You start to get all these ideas about what that's going to look like and all the exciting things that we'll get to do together. He's going to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, obviously. He's going to be a Dallas Mavericks fan. He's going to like the things that I like. We're never, ever going to have, between the two of us, cash on us to go eat a hachi dog. That's going to be unfortunate, but we'll do it together. We started to have some concerns when he was probably about 14 months old. And the concern started to add up. It was a few little things at first. Like he didn't seem to be making eye contact very well. And that's kind of one thing. That's one potential problem. But then there were other concerns that came up. He started to walk, but when he walked, he would walk up on his tiptoes. and he would flap his arms a lot. It was kind of those three things together, combined with the fact that at 18 months old, he really didn't have much speech. There was no real word he was saying. Sometimes he would babble, dad, 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 mom, 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 but he wasn't engaging with us the way that we thought he probably should. Now, my wife Emily and I had different opinions on this. I figured, maybe he's just a slow learner. He does have me for a father. That would make sense. Emily started to think like, actually, maybe it's more than that, and she started to become afraid that maybe he was autistic. And I thought, I don't think that that's probably the case, but we took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, look, it's borderline right now. Like, we're not sure, but we can send you to a specialist in Harrisburg. And so we went to Harrisburg to go see this specialist, and Emily was thinking like we were going to probably get bad news that day, but I thought we'd probably get good news that day. And so we go in with great anticipation, having read some about autism and having been trying to figure out what it is that was going on with our son. And we sit down, and there's this doctor across from us, and I'm sure she is very good at her job, and her job is to diagnose kids and to tell you what's going on with them. I'm sure she's very, very good at that, but her bedside manner was terrible. And she talked to Jack, and she didn't seem very kind to him, and she left the room, and she's gone for about 10 minutes, and we're just in eager anticipation on the edges of our seats. We can't hardly think straight because we're so worried about what might be coming. And she walks into the room, and she sits down, and she just says very matter-of-factly, okay, so Jack has autism, and what you'll want to do next is you'll want to start contacting these. I have no idea what she said after that. My boy has autism. Can you just give us a minute? Just a minute. I don't know how to process this. I had driven separately because I had come from work, and I got in the car, and I was just so upset and so mad. And I'm the guy who's worked through God and evil and experiencing hardship. Like, I'm the guy who knows that bad things happen, and it's not always a direct result of sin. It's not always a direct result of someone else's sin. Sometimes we just live in a fallen world, and it's something bad happens. It doesn't mean that God ordained it to happen. It just means that sometimes bad things happen. And even in the midst of that, all I could do on the way home is yell, why? Why would you take this little innocent boy who's done nothing wrong and give him this affliction he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his life? And I started thinking about our future and what I had dreamed of and what that would look like. And now it was a total blank slate. I have no idea what comes next. I tell you, if you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. Like, it's different. Everybody's different. And so the future was totally unknowable. I don't know if he's going to be able to get a job. I don't know if he's going to be able to speak, to ever say a word. I read something that week that stuck with me this whole time. And it was from an autistic person. He was an adult who was speaking at a conference, and he said to them, if you tell someone, I wish you didn't have autism, what you're actually saying is, I wish you were someone else. Because their autism makes up the fabric of who they are as a person. And so while I grieved the fact that the future was very unknowable now, and that my son would always have to work through this, I love him so much. I'm so thankful for who he is. God, thank you for making him exactly like he is. And so we wrestled with that when it felt like we were dying inside, and when it felt like God had abandoned us. I was able to, not in my own strength, but I was able to follow after the example of King David and my parents and my in-laws and mentors and Sunday school teachers like Grace Sugar and others who have poured into the lives of children and taught them faithfulness to God in the midst of trials and tribulations. And I was able to say, God, I don't understand this, and I don't know what to do with it. In the midst of all this, your will be done, not mine. In the midst of it all, take this, because I am not strong enough to carry it by myself. That was about 3.5 years ago. And we still don't know
what tomorrow or next year looks like. We still have lots of concerns. Jack is able to speak now, but he's very hard to understand. And people who are around him all the time have to constantly ask him to repeat himself. He gets frustrated with that sometimes, but he's such a good-natured kid. He takes after his mom like that. He's kind to others, and he has my wife's sweetness and personality a lot, but he has my extrovertedness. He came into the lobby a couple of weeks ago, and he saw a bunch of you standing around talking, and he looked at my wife, and he said, I want to say hello to everyone. And he started to run around the lobby. 2 weeks ago, I came home, and I was tired, and I was hurt. I had been in a dirt bike accident, which I'll tell you about in a few weeks. That's why I have this beard. My face has no skin on it. So I wasn't feeling good, and I laid down on the floor. And we've been remodeling this house for a couple of months, and that was weighing on me, and it's weighing on me when I see some of the hurt that people have been going through all over the U.S. and Charlottesville and everything else. And I'm just down that day, and I lay down on the floor. And Jack comes up to me, and he says, Dada, what's wrong? And I said, oh, buddy, I'm just tired. I'm a little hurt. I don't feel great. I'm a little sad today. He said, but Dada, it's going to be okay. And then he turned and he sat on my chest and he said, look at my booty. I want so badly for you in your darkest hour, in your disappointments, to follow after David and said, even when it feels like God's abandoned me, I will not abandon him. To recognize that when we need him the most, he is there for us. That when we need him the most, that is the time when we're often tempted to turn away from him because we just don't want to believe that things could change or that circumstances can get better. And to recognize that, you know what, there are some of us who are going to end our lives in sad ways because things just don't break for us. And yet the promise that was fulfilled for David in Jesus can be fulfilled for us in Christ as well. We do not have just today, but all of eternity to spend with Christ, to see our stories play out and to see our circumstances change and to see what the enemy may have meant for evil actually be turned for good. That's the opportunity we have if we cling tight to Christ in the moments where it feels like we're abandoned by everyone else. I so long for us as a church to grasp onto God and to say, like, no matter what circumstances I'm facing, I am going to follow after you. To believe in him that even when it feels like a kind of death inside, it is God who can give us the power to run out of that grave because the resurrected King is resurrecting us. That's the possibility we have. So some of you have faced great disappointment, and some of you are in the midst of a hard season, and you're not sure what's next. I'm going to ask us all across the meeting house to stand up right now. We rise because our resurrected King is risen. We rise today to stand to recognize we can do this through the power of God. May we not abandon him even when we're not sure if others have abandoned us. Let's run out of that grave together.